Welcome back for an update video on DAAD Builder, looking at the changes which are coming down the line. Some of these have been released and some will be in the next release. A few of the changes took place in the font editor. We've now made it possible to copy fonts to other cells, so if you're trying to make very similar looking characters, you don't have to start again from scratch every time. For instance, we can select Z, we can copy that, select a cell, we can paste, and then if we save, that is now saved in that cell. We can also do a direct paste too. We've added the ability to be able to drag and draw, so before you had to edit everything pixel by pixel, now you can just drag over that character, and that makes it a lot easier to draw, a lot quicker. And if we save that, that will remove the one we've copied across. At the same time, in the graphics editor, we've added the ability to be able to use characters as brushes. So we turn that on and we select a character. It'll show you a little preview of what we're going to be using here. This comes from the 8x8 fonts. So in the graphic editor, turn on the brush, select the character we want, and then we can use the pencil tool. That will just snap within the 8x8 cell and fill that cell with that character. This could be quite handy if you want to do some text across the screen. We can also flood fill with the character. We can use the brush tool with the character, so it's a bit like the dither tool, but obviously in the font editor, the 8x8, you could make your own custom characters that you want to be able to paint with, make your own custom brushes. A feature that was suggested by Wayne, which is a very nice one, was the ability to add labels to messages. So we're working way through the tutorial. We had a number of messages, sort of message 0, message 1, message 2. So you type in your message, say your message is hello, and then when you went in the text editor, you'd type message, and you'd have to remember what number that message was. For the text editor, so you type message 1 into the text editor. Now you can add a label to that. So if we put hello in here, that will save that label. And if we go into our defines, at the bottom we have two new sections. We have a system messages define and a messages define. Here's the one we just created, and it's added a little M in front of that to show us that define is a message define. The system messages will add a little S in front. If you've already added that M yourself, it won't add another one on there for you. Now in the text editor, if we jump down to section 5, and we'll just amend the inventory section here. So we've got message, and instantly it pops up with our define box with M hello. If we had more in there, we would have those as parameters we can use for message. If we go to the process table, we can do the same thing there. So here's the message we just added, and your drop down box will have your define labels here. If we just add another message in, add message, we won't add a define label, we'll just say bye. Then we go to the process editor, process 5, that inventory message, and we have the option here for 1, but it also gives us a shortcut of what that message is as well as a helper. So if you're not using a label, you have got a shortcut here. You won't see that shortcut in the text editor. So that's a nice feature that probably really should have been in there from the beginning when we had the defines for locations and objects. It fills a nice gap, and it was a nice feature, so thanks to Wayne for suggesting that. So a lot of work's begun on the background on vector drawing. Uto has done an amazing job with DAAD Ready and the Maluva edition, which allows you to add raster graphics to so many of the targets. And it really is an amazing job he's done. I still have a liking for the old vector graphics and their simplicity, the small amount of space they take up in the database as well. So on the back of that, we've tried to mimic what the 3 original graphics editors for the Spectrum, the Commodore and the Amstrad did. But to allow you to do it a little bit more visually in a slightly more modern fashion, so we can now, with the draw tool, we can draw lines on the screen. If you right click, it will stop drawing. We can do a relative move, so relative to that line, and then we can draw, say, some more lines. We can do an absolute move to a position. We can plot a single pixel. We can fill, we can shade, which again uses font characters to fill in, so we can define our own shades with the font editor. And that will use the font for each of these machines. So this would use the 8x6 font, Commodore the 8x8 font, and the Amstrad is, the Commodore is the C64 font and the Amstrad is the 8x8 font. We can then manually make amendments to our drawing if we didn't like what we've done. So we can edit what we've done. You'll see the whole screen is moving because these points are all relative to the initial line. We can also add commands in between on that list. So we've got a drop down list here. If we want to change the ink color, we can choose ink. And then, like the process editor, if you hover above or below a command, you can add that command in where you want. So if we drop below relative, insert a command, and we'll change the ink color to green, and that will show all the lines after that drawing are now all green. There's a lot more features to this, and I'll do a much more in-depth discussion on this later on. We obviously have a grid. We can turn on and off. We can turn off snapping to the grid. We also have a line tool like in the raster editor, where you can set that to be where you want your screen, just as a visual editor, so that you can draw too. So we'll go into all of this a lot more. Also working on importing graphics from the original editors, which mostly works now, and also being able to import from the old original discs that were released when DAAD was recovered. So here's some graphics from one of those games. You can import it into the Amstrad version, and we can look through at the graphics from that game. So that's about it for this feature. I'd say there's a lot more work going on this. We can currently export graphics. We haven't yet tried seeing whether we can import those back into the original editors, and then the next step will be seeing whether there's some way that we can integrate this with DAAD Ready to be able to use those graphics in your adventures in DAAD Ready as well. So that's about it for this video. The next one will continue with the tutorial that we were working on, so I will see you in the next video.